Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
My friends, if you listen to these polls out there, and I think that they should be used as a tool, of course, we can't always trust what the polls tell us are going to happen, but I think it can be a tool to understand what we are up against. Polling in, where's the outfit? This is at the newsmax.com. Democrats favor socialism over capitalism, 58% to 32%. This is absolutely, I don't want to say unbelievable, but this is incredible in the sense that we have drifted so far to the left. I don't think the majority of these folks even know what socialism is. Yet, of course, they'll say that I don't know what socialism is, but that's fine. They can say what they will. This is we've reached a very dangerous time here in this nation. I want to talk about this today. I also want to talk a little bit about what's happening regarding the 2026 midterm elections, which we are now staring directly into. I want to talk about how the Democrats are coming for the Supreme Court, my friends, and there's other things I'd like to get to as well. Welcome today's program. If you want to share your thoughts, be a part of this conversation, I invite you, 317-785-1030. You can text, you can leave a message at that number, and I will, listen, we sometimes use some of the things that we hear there to talk about on this program. So 317-785-1030 is where you can call or text, my friends. If you're worried about your bad cholesterol numbers, if you're worried about those being too high, if you've got a history of cholesterol issues in your family, maybe you're younger and you just want to stay on the preventative side of this, you want to address this to make sure that you stay on top of your heart's health, check out Solti.com. You can find the product that they make, which has been proven by science. Solti's been proven by science. The science is spoken here. It's been proven to lower cholesterol for folks that may be able to do the same for you. You can check it out at Solti.com, S-O-L-T-E-A, Solti.com. All natural, by the way, and again, clinically proven as a dietary supplement to lower cholesterol. There's no prescriptions, there's no doctor's visits, none of that stuff. If you need to do those things, I'm not discouraging you from that, but this is a good first step in taking care of your cholesterol health and your heart health. Solti.com, S-O-L-T-E-A, promo code Todd will get you 50% off your first 3-month supply, and you'll get free shipping to boot. Again, Solti.com, promo code Todd. Here is a article at Newsmax I found just as I was preparing for the program here today. It says here in the article, Democrats hold a substantially more favorable view of socialism than capitalism. They hold a substantially more favorable view of socialism than capitalism, according to a new CBS YouGov survey. It was released yesterday, Sunday, as the party's far left wing gains momentum ahead of the 2026 midterms and Democratic primaries turn increasingly on economic populism. That's what the article says here. 58% of Democrats view socialism positively, while only 18% view it negatively, the poll found. Only 32% hold a positive view of capitalism, while 50% view it negatively. Socialism's positive rating, among Democrats exceeds capitalism's by 26 percentage points. Friends, It's an incredible thing to witness. You know, in the 20th century, these governments that took control of economies, these governments that treaded upon freedom. Excuse me here, as I've got a frog in the throat here this morning. But these governments that took over economies and were tyrannical and took away liberty and freedom, they killed more than 100 million people in the 20th century. And in case you're wondering, that was the 1900s. I was born in the 1900s, my friends. I remember the Cold War. I remember specifically Ronald Reagan staring down Mikhail Gorbachev. I remember the fall of the Berlin Wall. I remember all that happened when people were able to freely leave East Berlin and go to West Berlin and just walk out after years of being imprisoned in their own cities. Now, you'll say, Todd, that was communism. That's not socialism. I want to pause for just a moment. And listen, I understand that some people think that there is some dramatic differences here between these ideologies, in spite of the fact that Karl Marx, of course, the founding father of Marxism, told us that socialism was merely a temporary pause, a temporary situation, a temporary state of things before the communists moved into pure communism and Marxism. It's a necessary first step towards that end. Now, there's some people who say, we don't believe in step 2, we just believe in step 1. I'm telling you, the first step is incredibly dangerous. You have to ask yourself, and this is something, as a student of American history, I've studied these things much of my life. I studied these things at Butler University formally, as though that, if that matters to some people think you have to have a piece of paper saying that you know and understand these things. But political science, I talked about these things in class, studied these things, read these things, debated these things, argued these things. But the issue of liberty is something that you don't hear a lot about. You hear it from people like me. But in the common discourse out there over politics, what you hear is democracy. You don't hear a lot of people in the public square, in the overall debate, talking about liberty. If you go back to the founding of this nation, liberty was what was the essential idea, the essential, I don't want to say talking point, but it was the narrative. Liberty, your freedom, your ability to live in accordance with your own preferences and choices. You could establish, a business, start a business. You could pursue a religion of your choice. You weren't forced. You weren't coerced. You were free. And that was, listen, Almighty God has made us to be free. And we need to talk about liberty more than we do in this country. Now, in this program, we talk a lot about it, but some folks talk only about democracy. Our founders were not fans of pure democracy. That's why we have a constitutional republic. Of course, there are democratic aspects in our system of government. No one is denying that. That's actually a good thing, right? The Constitution talks about the consent. Now, when we talk about how our government was framed, the whole idea is predicated upon the consent of the governed. You can't force somebody, you shouldn't force somebody to comply with your way of doing things. And socialism is exactly that. I know that people don't see it that way. Of course, they don't understand what it is. Socialism taking over the means of production at its core. If you want the technical definition of socialism, it means that the government controls the means of production. Now, some of these folks will say, well, that means we, the people, control the means of production. And isn't that democratic? You see how this works, right? But what it is at its core is taking over things that someone else has built, something that belongs not to the government, but to the individuals, plural, in many cases, who have built these things. And it's interesting to me. It's interesting to me when I think about socialism, the place that they want to start is taking over the means of production. In other words, they want to take over something that someone else has already previously built, which that person almost inevitably built that in a free market economy. What is so bad about capitalism? My friends, at the core of the whole thing, capitalism means that we are engaging in an exercise of using our liberties and freedoms in the marketplace. You know, some people want to believe, I remember this back when I was in college, and you know, it still comes up today, although this particular debate, this particular thing that I'm going to mention doesn't come up much in the mainstream. It hasn't recently, and by recently I mean in many, many years. But there's a movement that says that freedom, you know, freedom to, in the real sense, freedom in the sense that the founders intended freedom and liberty to be understood, was meant to mean that the individual could pursue his or her interests, live his or her life without the government dictating, mandating, and interfering in his or her life. And to the degree to which the government can interfere in your life, it had to be something that is absolutely legitimate from the state's perspective, and it has to be absolutely and totally necessary. You just can't say the government should be able to take control of someone's life and their business and their pocketbook because a majority of people says that that is a good thing. I remember Walter Williams. He was an economist, a college professor, economist. So taught somewhere in Virginia, I believe. I forget which school it was. But he used to fill in for the late, great Rush Limbaugh on his program when Rush was out of town. And I remember listening to Walter Williams. And Walter Williams, he had a way of making economics pretty simple. I think in many ways the same as Thomas Sowell. I think in many ways the same as the late, great Milton Friedman as well. And so, Walter Williams would say, look, if I'm walking down the street and you put your hand in my pocket and take out my wallet, that's theft. I can go and tell the police you stole my wallet. They're going to retrieve my property. Again, in a perfect world, that's the way it's supposed to work. And then you are going to be charged with breaking the law, with robbery or whatever it is that you've specifically done, whether you used for what you stole my wallet. You're going to be held accountable. You're going to be held accountable for that legally. You can face consequences, which include jail time for stealing. However, Walter Williams would say, if I vote for a bunch of people who then take their hand collectively as the government and put it in my pocket and take out my wallet, it's still the same exact thing. I didn't give them my consent. They didn't have the legal right to do so, but because a group of them got together and said that the majority of us now think that we can put our hands in your pocket and take your wallet, suddenly, my friends, some people think that that means it can be a legal activity. And the thing is, it's not. Taxation at some point becomes legal theft. Some people would say at any point. Again, I would say any point outside the Constitution, meaning what we have given the government our consent to do. Here are the things, federal government, that we have told you that you can do. That we have said, we are free people. You're not the boss of us. We're the boss of you. Here are the things you can do, because we understand. Listen, I go through this a lot. Government is force. I understand we want as limited amount of force in our lives as possible. Here are the things that we have given you the power to do as a federal government. Just this list and nothing more. And so these are the things you can do, and you can raise taxes for that purpose. And there should be some rules and structure for how you can raise those taxes. In fact, if you go back to the founding of this country, again, there was never initially a direct taxation on individual people. In fact, the states paid taxes. Today it is, again, I've gone through this before. Our country has deviated so much. It's deviated so much from how it was founded. Initially, state legislatures elected federal U.S. senators. Now we don't do that. That goes to the popular vote. There was a reason for that. It was a very good reason for that. I think that's a major problem in our system today. We also, initially in this country, didn't have it set up to where the federal government could tax you directly. States used to send money to the federal government. They would levy taxes, raise money, and then send the money to the federal government. Today, it's exactly the opposite. Today, we have this thing called the IRS. You've got to tell them what you make. You've got to report all these things that our founding fathers would be mortified about, my friends. They would be absolutely shocked that the average American believed it was the legitimate duty and responsibility of the federal government to employ a taxing agency that went around looking, demanding information into your personal finances and what you made. And now we fill these things out every year. We act like this is totally normal and natural. Washington, D.C., through the IRS, collects our taxes, and then they'll give grants back to states if states comply with what our federal government wants the states to do. And this is, again, the polar opposite of how this was set up. We used to have 50, well, there weren't 50 states at the founding, but we used to have a bunch of states in this nation that acted independently, but that were united under a federal government, under a constitution. They would give money from the taxes raised proportionally from their citizens, right? If your state was 8% of the overall population, or 4% or whatever, 2%, then your state would be responsible for 2% of the federal budget. They would raise those taxes, send their portion of the share to Washington, D.C. Now we don't do that. Now they tax you directly. Now we've got it to the point to where there are people who aren't just content with you and I being taxed collectively here, but they want to target, my friends. They want to target individuals. So you think about how far we have fallen in that sense, to where we have people who want to target certain individuals with taxes. Make this person pay more taxes. Because of what? Because of their level of success, because you think that you're entitled to what they earn. Well, we bought their products, Todd. We bought the iPhone or the whatever it is, the Microsoft computer or whatever. Listen, some of these folks are not people that I personally agree with. I think they're on the wrong side of a lot of issues. I think some of these people are real shady characters and actors, but that doesn't give me and you the right to raid their bank accounts because we think we're entitled to a percentage of what they have earned, what they have accumulated. That's simply not the case, but that's what a lot of people think. And so they think more government means better situations, better circumstances, better standard of living for them personally. They think, hey, what's it matter to this guy if we take his money, all this wealth that he has, and we use it to fund my education or my health care or my whatever. This is an incredibly selfish way of looking at things. And by the way, we still haven't, this is only what you would call democratic socialism, where you believe that taxes should be high. This is what the Scandinavian countries have, by the way. They don't have socialism. They have what you would call democratic socialism. You would say they have free market economies, but these economies, the people living in these economies are paying high rates of taxes for public services, for whatever, healthcare, education, whatever the case may be. And so that's still not socialism, but it's beginning to drift that direction because the idea has been planted that what you provide for yourself, what you work to produce belongs in part, some portion belongs to somebody else. And that is just simply not accurate. It belongs to you, my friends. You're the ones who earned it. Now, I'm not here going to sit behind this microphone and tell you that it's good to be selfish. I just believe that it's not the government to determine what is and is not selfish. I would say as an individual who has been blessed to live in this country, I would say as an individual who's been blessed by God to be American, to be prosperous, I would make the case, again, I wouldn't by force of law, but I would make the argument to an individual that we should be generous. Now, you can be generous in any number of ways. You shouldn't be coerced to be generous where the people tell you you have to be generous. That's the beauty of having individuals looking at data, looking at details in their own communities, what's needed, where is the need. I used to run a nonprofit. I used to be an executive director for a Boys and Girls Club, and we had people in the community that would give money to the club to help kids. That's what we did. We provided a place for kids to go after school, provided programs that helped them become caring, productive adults, caring, productive citizens, I think is what the mission statement at the time said. But regardless, this being told that one should do something or feeling that I should do something doesn't mean it should be done by force of law. But these leftists, these Democrats, believe more and more that you should be forced to have more of what you've earned, accumulated, built, taken from you. And why? Why do they think that? Sometimes it's because they personally want to benefit from what you've earned. Sometimes it's because they think that is morally superior than having people independently run their own wealth by their own preferences and thoughts and how they want to manage it. Some people just don't know the difference. Some people go along with the ebbs and flows of society. It sounds good to some people, but it's dangerous for a free market and a free society. It produces less prosperity. The government is the most wasteful organization. I've got to take a break here, but the government is the most wasteful organization imaginable. I can't imagine wanting to give it more money. If anything, it needs less power and it needs to get out of the way of the private sector. Friends, are you tired of spending your hard-earned money at businesses that then turn around and support leftist causes? Well, that's exactly why we created Freedom Marketplace. It is a free searchable directory of businesses that share your conservative principles and values, businesses that have vowed not to support leftist candidates, leftist causes, these socialists that we're talking about here this morning. There's no login required, though you certainly can create an account, no strings attached, just good patriotic businesses pushing the same direction you are. Check it out today, freedommarketplace.net. That's freedommarketplace.net, liberty and business for all. Time out for me, my friends, back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. I want to talk about what is the appeal. What is the appeal to socialism? Why do 58% of Democrats, according to this poll that I've referenced here today, why do 58% of Democrats favor socialism over capitalism? 58% prefer socialism, 32% favor capitalism. What is the appeal of this ideology? Why do people find themselves? This is becoming more and more popular. I've talked about this. It's still not when you look at the population as a whole, as popular as they want you to believe that it is. But it is definitely more popular than it should be. It should be getting 0% of support from any group of people. But I want to talk about that this segment. Before I do that, though, my friends, let's be honest. When your financial world starts getting a little bit more complicated, you need more than one-size-fits-all advice. That's where Full Suite Wealth shines the brightest. Their team specializes in working with families and individuals at your level, offering personalized guidance that goes far beyond the basics, from private equity and private credit to options strategies and coordinated legal planning. Full Suite Wealth helps you see the big picture and make confident decisions about your legacy. It's about having a dedicated team to guide you each and every step of the way so you can focus on what matters most: your family, your goals, your future. If you want real confidence in your financial life, head on over to fullsuitewealth.com. That's fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy, secure your future. What is so appealing, my friends, about socialism? Now, again, what many on the left mean today by socialism is they want to see more government programs. They want to see more taxation delivered, taken from the American people, more money taken from the wealthy, the people they have demonized and targeted and so forth. They want to see more money taken from them and then put into programs that do any number of things. Of course, these programs never do the stated purpose. These things are always more expensive. They never accomplish what they set out to do. In fact, they make things worse. You look at all of the tax dollars, the federal dollars that have been thrown at education. It's one of the main reasons. In fact, it is the main reason that education, that a college degree has skyrocketed in cost, in many instances way beyond what is reasonable and rational. Factor in that people often these leftists then use their positions of power in academia, in universities, in colleges around the country to, well, as Rush used to say, take these skulls full of mush who are coming into college. Take it easy. I was a skull full of mush at my younger days as well. And it's just in good fun. But you take these young, impressionable minds that are then taught by these pointy-headed academic elitists who criticize and mock and ridicule traditional values and love for America, conservatism, and this sort of thing. And it becomes a popular way of quote unquote educating people in this country. And they come out as little leftists on the other end of the little process here, on the other side of the conveyor belt, if you will. This is why, if you want to know why more quote-unquote educated people lean to the left, it's because this is a system that's designed to produce people that lean to the left. I'm tired of arguments like that, by the way. Why don't you make arguments if you're going to argue against conservatism? Don't tell me that the experts are liberal. I couldn't care less. I think half the experts are bona fide idiots. I think that what we should do is actually compare and contrast the ideas, debate on the merits of the positions and the policies and those sorts of things, instead of saying, well, if you're educated, you're a liberal, and if you're not, you're a conservative. Well, there's different types of education. Just because you're educated doesn't mean that you're smarter. That's something else, my friends. Some of the smartest people I know, the most intelligent, the most successful I know, some of them absolutely have zero or next to zero college education, formal education, and so forth. Many of these folks are self-taught. They dropped out of school. They didn't go to school. They built a business in their early years. They didn't have the burden of debt. They just got to work in a trade or whatever right after high school or went to trade school, whatever the case may be. Deal with some incredibly intelligent people who are solving lots of problems, who have very profitable businesses and so forth. Some of them went to college, of course. Others didn't. But I would say the ones that did go to college, many of them, most of them, in fact, would say that that's probably not even the difference maker. Maybe in some cases, there's some things you certainly have to go to college for. Regardless, we have this fight today, and we're moving further to the left, the Democrat Party is, and what is so appealing about it? To some, I think it sounds fairer, right? In fact, you ask the average man on the street, the statement given by Karl Marx, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, a lot of people will say that sounds right. That's what we need to do. The problem is that's never how it works out. There's always a brutal authoritarian dictator that steps into the mix. They killed over 100 million people in the 20th century. Some people think it sounds good. Some people want to personally benefit from it. They think about it in terms of what they can accomplish. You know, it's interesting. They want to point at the people with the millionaires and billionaires, the people with money out there, and they want to say these people are greedy and selfish. But what is it that's fueling these folks, my friends? What is it that's fueling the folks who want to take the money from the millionaires and billionaires. I'm not here to just cast a unified front and say that every action taken by a millionaire and billionaire is good and commendable. That's not the case at all. In fact, I don't think that. I also don't think that that everything someone in poverty does is good. We're human beings, my friends. We have to look past this and understand that no person is 100% right. I mean, I know that if you listen to this program, you might be inclined to think we are. I'm kidding. The truth is that nobody is. Nobody's got it all figured out. And we've learned over the course of history that the more we consolidate power, the more that we have government grow, the less that people, respect individual liberty and freedom and the choices of other people. You don't have to agree with their choices. But the less that happens, the more we move into you're going to do it my way or else mentality. We'll take it by force mentality. That is not a good first step. And it's appealing to people because, again, they think you have a bunch of people who elect these representatives. They come into Washington, D.C. They're benevolent. They have pure intentions. They're working for the government. They're public servants, which, of course, to me is laughable. These folks go to Washington, D.C., sometimes with very little in the bank account, and then they retire as millionaires, multimillionaires from after quote unquote public service in Washington, D.C. was never meant to be like that. In fact, George Washington refused a salary. I think the only thing he did was pay for personal expenses that he had accrued during his time as president of the United States. Trump's doing the same thing. And you could say now that is public service. I mean, how many millions or billions of dollars could Trump have made over the time he's been president? His net worth took it on the chin his first time in office. There was an element of service there, but many of these folks, they go and see themselves personally enriched. They want to tell you that they're doing things for the good of the country. I don't know what it is that makes people so hypnotized by this. They just believe it to be the case. It's in many cases, I used to have someone, I don't have many encounters with him anymore. It's actually kind of a sad situation, but he hates corporations, and I'm not here to be a defender of corporations. That's not the point. Corporations have done some bad things, but I'm here to defend free markets. I think we should hold people accountable for certainly those who have broken the law. For those who have broken the trust, they should hopefully lose the business of their customer. If they violated the trust of people, that's the way that this stuff should be managed and so forth, instead of having government come in. But I was always amazed he was so skeptical and hated corporations, but yet the government he trusted fully. The government's going to make everything fair. The government's going to lower the sea levels to the perfect level if only conservatives and limited government types like me would get out of the way and so forth. It's just crazy talk. Because many times these same people that have been appointed to these positions or sometimes elected to these positions, some of them have been the same people in the corporate boardrooms that these folks hate and don't trust at all. But suddenly when they put on the ID badge that says U.S. Senator or member of House of Representatives or bureaucrat, suddenly this person is worth trusting with our entire existence and entire lives. That's foolishness, my friends. Wanting to put more control in the government is creating your own jail cell, my friend. That's what it's doing. Putting more power in government. Government is force, giving them more money, clamoring that they take something that belongs to someone else to redistribute it to you. All you're doing is building the very structure that will later imprison all of us through its own growing control and ultimate tyranny. That's what history has taught us. I've got to take a break, my friends. Quick time out. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. All of this has led me to the conclusion. It should lead us all to the conclusion that socialism is on the ballot in 2026. And keep in mind, we're just talking right now about growing government programs. We're not even talking about their next dream, which is in fact true socialism, where government steps in and takes control of certain industries, the means of production and so forth. You've already heard Zoran Mamdani, the lunatic communist mayor of New York City. You've heard him out there talking about how it's well, a good thing, and it's something that the government of New York City should be doing when they come in and take over private property, take over some of these apartment buildings and rentals and so forth to make affordable housing. They've taken a step towards socialism with the building of these city-run little socialist compound grocery stores that are going to be trying to undercut effectively other grocery stores in these communities. They say they're going to have 30% less prices, but their costs haven't reduced by 30%. What they're doing is subsidizing it with tax dollars from people that aren't using the grocery stores, or maybe they are using the grocery stores, but they're just paying for it in another way. This is a shell game. There's nothing here that makes any sense whatsoever, especially when you realize there's no way in this world, hear me say this, there's no way in this world that the government-run grocery stores in New York City can do it as well as the private grocery stores can. It's just not possible. It is an absolute impossibility. And I'll tell you, there's several reasons why, but perhaps the most important reason is that when there's no risk of loss, meaning personal loss for the people running these grocery stores, they can't do it. It doesn't translate. So if there's no pressure for you to have personal loss, let's say you start a business and you realize, if I don't find a way to become as efficient and produce as high a quality product and as the best customer service that I can provide that's comparable with my competition, I'm not going to gain customers. And so you find a way to do it because there is a direct cost to you if you don't do it. Your whole business, in fact, you may lose the whole thing. But see, in government-run grocery stores or government-run anything, it's exactly the opposite. Public schools, I'm telling you, it's exactly the opposite. What happens is there's an amount of money every year that's allocated, that's given out to run the public school, whatever. I'm not trying to pick on the school, but just as an example. At the end of the year, they say, wow, we need more money. We didn't accomplish what we set forth to do, and so what do we need? We need more money. There's a saying for this amongst people who make investments. You don't throw good money after bad, but what happens in the public schools or in anything run by government, the government, they say, well, if we would have had a little bit more money, we could have accomplished these objectives. But in the private sector, that doesn't work that way. At some point, an investor might give you more money if they're convinced that it will make a difference. But they're also likely to say, if you can't make it work with what you have, you can't make it work. And so there is that process. That process, it's like the butterfly coming out of the cocoon, right? The caterpillar builds the cocoon and it comes out a butterfly. But it's the process of struggling through the cocoon that actually develops the wings and allows the butterfly to be a fully butterfly ready to fly. And if you don't go through that, if you don't go through the pruning, if you don't go through the press, if you aren't challenged and aren't forced to make improvements, you won't. And government will never make improvements because it just simply asks for more money. Well, we're here doing a good thing, giving food to the citizens. We're giving them a discount of 30%. We need more money to make that happen. Guaranteed that's what's going to happen. And eventually you run out of other people's money. This is a self-fulfilling prophecy, my friends. It's right there for anybody who wants to see it to see. And this is on the ballot in 2026. It's on the ballot in 2026. Right now, they just want to grow social programs, government programs. They want to take from the rich and give to the poor like Robin Hood. But of course, the more government does this, the more, again, it takes away freedom. The more freedom it takes away from someone else, the more freedom it eventually takes from you. It's justified in its mind. We're building our own prisons when we grow these governments. We're building our own prisons as we're clamoring. We're cheering on, my friends. We're cheering on the people that are building these monstrous governments that take away our liberty and freedom, because at first they're going after someone else and it's helping us, we think. Take from that guy, give to me, and you cheer it on. All the while you're building your own prison, because it's a society in which we all live And these governments get too big for their britches, as we like to say in these parts, and they eventually take away, my friends. They take away your liberty, your choice. They take away the very just passion of living. I mean, these socialist governments beat the daylights out of people, my friends. I got to wrap up here. Friends, if you're dealing with discomfort, tired of living off of prescriptions, you are not alone. A lot of folks are looking for something natural they can trust. That's why I want you to check out Christopher's Organic Botanicals, a family-run natural kratom company rooted in truth, tradition, and transparency. They partner directly with farmers in Indonesia. They lab test everything before it ever reaches your hands. There's no hype or synthetics. Just the real thing done right. Start with their kratom starter pack. Code Todd Huff's going to save you 10% off your first purchase there. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. That's Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency. Time is up for me, my friends. Have a great day. We'll talk again soon. SDG.